The Meadow Elves. In Ethan you will find all manner of things, but in the end, love, war, and nature dominate the stories we tell, and music turns it all to song. But before you get tired of song and sun, I want to tell you about the time I visited the Meadow Elves. When you leave my woods here and head west, following the lower ridge of the Great Valley, quickly you will find yourself in farmlands, as I did. There, once the trees thin and the land gradually flattens, the western mountains loom to remind you that the hills and valleys of home are not all the world, as sometimes they seem to be. I begged supper and a roof from a family who were kind enough to take me in for the night. The farm folk of the Sunny Basin are a kind and peaceful folk, who are glad to take in travelers so long as they are respectful. I praised their children's songs when they sang for us after dinner. I spent the next morning helping on the farm. The farmer, knowing I was eager to go on my way, only kept me until the sun no longer touched the horizon. Before then, I carried in the fresh milk from the barn to the storehouse, reset and restrung the dinner bell, fed the chickens, changed the water in the horses' troughs, mulched a patch for the season's butterbean crop, which I took too quickly because I myself grow snap beans in my own garden, and I was dressing my third scarecrow with a stubborn and threadbare blue flannel shirt when the sun peeked over my shoulder and bathed the soft curves and edges of the fields beyond in amber light. I tied the twine quickly and bid the scarecrow a kindly farewell and best of luck, this mostly to fool the crows watching me from just beyond the wheat stalks. I bathed in the pond at the bottom of the hill beside bobbing green ducks, who politely quacked good morning, and it was a good morning. I had worked my share, and the day had only just begun. I continued west with the gentle warmth of hospitality in my heart, knowing I had repaid my debt and was sent with wishes of good fortune onward. Once the river meets the road, the farms become fewer and larger as the land becomes its flattest just before the mountains jut skyward like towers. There the river deepens and the banks turn from reeds to grassy muck to hard-packed dirt and stone. Every now and again a boulder will point from the bed of the river, which as it nears the mountain range goes from fast and dribbling, ribbing over a pebbly floor, dotted with fishermen, to a slow but strong steady flow, even and ceaseless, unstoppable. Yet it breaks and circumvents your hand when you dip it in for an earthy and cool drink. A settlement lies at the base of the sharp towering mountains, where travelers congregate. Odd, as I saw so few on the road as I walked. Then again, there are many roads that lead to the shady crossroad, and the rhythm of my 2 feet moving forward tends to place a welcome spell of hypnotic suspension on time and feeling and even observation. This is how I arrived at the shady crossroad, which is to say, it was the state of mind I broke to take account of my directions. I'd made good time. This was when I observed the curiosity of the name of the place. It was only correct in the second half of the day. I caught the next riverboat, on which we packed like school children, legs crossed and hands out on the floor to steady ourselves from the rocking. Our oarman was a man with great big wings. They looked like grasshopper wings to me, translucent and spotted with green tendrils running through. When the boat rocked, they fluttered and waved to keep his immaculate balance. Within the pass, the river sped up as it was corralled narrower and narrower. Looking up, the clouds ran one way as we sailed the other. It was cool, and the air was thick with the sparkling water. On each of our flanks, silver stones stretched high, jagged, bumpy, and holding quartz, pink and white like bubbly ice. Soon it was dark, and the sky became like distant blue fire at night as we sunk lower, or rather the mountains climbed higher. This is where we were tossed, sometimes swinging so close to the walls I was tempted to put my arms out to brace myself, but such was strictly forewarned to be unwise, and against the oarsman's personal vessel rules, and he being captain, I did not disobey. Another traveler put his arm out, but the oarman swiftly smacked it down with his oar. But still we travelers let out a sigh of relief when the river opened up to an endlessly large field, flat and yellow and green with tall grass. Looking across it, dragonflies and sprites arced just above the spiky blades, glittering diamonds. They were hard to tell apart as they looked so similar. The western side of the mountain is where the Meadow Elves live. Now they are not the only Meadow Elves in Ethan, nor are the Meadow Elves who live by the river to be confused with River Elves. At the same time, objectively and technically, some Meadow Elves are River Elves, by virtue of living by the river. And if a river elf lived in a meadow, they would unequivocally be a meadow elf. Either way, elves of all kinds live all across Ethan, but many meadow elves live in the meadow west of the mountains that separate the meadow and the Sunny Basin. And wherever there are elves, as a generalization, there are sprites, as well as many other places. I must clarify, these were sprites, not some other kind of fairy. In fact, they were meadow sprites. Now that's not to say... Anyway, fairy is an umbrella term that, while applicable, is not entirely accurate to describe the sprites in this story. They were meadow sprites. There were also meadow elves and meadowlarks. And when you make the jarring transition from the stony trenched river to a warm and lively meadow, it is quite disorienting. By the banks, an elf plucked calming notes on an ornate lute beneath a willow tree, hanging low and stroking our hair as it swept us in our way. The river's rushing shh that echoed in the pass faded to a high, whooshing whistle, as delicate and fine as the dexterous fingertips of the bard, whose long legs wove through the willow's exposed roots, just like one of his own body. Rainbow trout leapt from the water, breaking the smooth, wavy sheet. Children raced to catch each other, knees high to navigate the tall grass, carrying dandelions like wands. Girls washed their dresses in the shallows, ringing out floral patterns of red and brown. We came to a smooth bank where the grass was cleared, and we disembarked, I taking a corner of the riverboat on my shoulder, as the oarman and 2 other passengers did the same. We passed it to 4 elves, who dropped it in the center of what I now saw to be a small town. I noticed, as the elves tied long blades of maiden grass around our wrists and braided them up to our elbows, that the meadow elves were wearing vests of gold so thin it acted like cloth. They wore woven grass hats and shoes and belts as well, and blended in with the greenery of the meadow. Around the town the grass was lower, with purple and white flowers swaying in the wind. There was a bluish tint to the place, indescribable, not like an obscuring haze, nor like a cloud of fog, but undeniable, like something you can only see if you don't look right at it. It would be like trying to describe sunlight in terms of what it touches, to describe the feeling that hung over this place. You feel easy, languid, and whole. In their grass houses, and I know what you're thinking, fire hazard, but no, their homes are coated in a thin layer of river mud to make them shine and resist flame, not to mention the elf spells that protect them. They have every comfort, but still choose to spend most of their time outside. For this I do not blame them, as the meadow both holds you and shows you the breadth of the world without containing you. I know you probably picture elves in lavish stone and crystal palaces, but elves, like everybody else, work with what is available, and what a good job they do. They build in the meadow grass structures that rival even castles of wood and limestone. They who were so recently strangers became my friends when we passed the day splashing in the pure, sweet water that tastes like the juice of a fat red strawberry mixed with the steam of a sizzling bath when it runs over your lips. We came dripping from the river, and I walked around aimlessly, as if inhabited by a ghost who had been there before. As I dried, a white butterfly hovered before me, and when I lifted a finger to offer landing, she was caught up with by a train of her kind, and the rainbow they made when they flew in a line looped-de-looped and encircled my wrist, so I was a part of their pack for a moment, before they continued across the meadow, a waving line of dappled colors, fluttering and bending to the breeze's uneven whisper. Dusk came, and the dragonflies and sprites quadrupled. Then, as the now dry riverboat was set aflame, they vanished from sight, though still their wings beat. Many would sit upon our shoulders as we congregated around the blaze that sent sparks high into the cloudless twilight. I looked to the oarman expectantly, wondering about his lack of concern for his boat. But just as the moon rose, he excused himself, and his wings set a gust over us, fanning the flame which surged and propelled the oarman with great speed up and up. I tracked him until his features fuzzed, and he became a shadowy silhouette against the sky. And finally he dipped back over the mountain, and I came quickly to understand the sense behind an oarman with wings. The next day I awoke on the ground, but my back was not sore. The meadow was verdant again with the light of day, and I began my journey home, hoping that the feeling that bathed me there in the meadow and the ghost that enchanted me would remain for some time. My return trip was long, as no riverboat can rise from the ashes and go upriver, even if many can do one or the other. My 2 legs bore me across every step and every stone for every part of the mountains between my body and home, and I crossed over fully by the afternoon. Then I was lazily chased by the sweeping shade that became the gradually dimming memory of the time I visited the Meadow Elves down the river beyond the mountains. Now, even though I am home, with my fireplace guttering to embers and wrapped comfortably in my pajamas, I feel that exhausted longing of the part of the journey that leads home. When your visions have shifted from dreams of adventure to the desire for the familiar, for your bed and kitchen, and the sounds of the birds in your yard, the shadows that fall the same each day from the trees whose personal names you know, the smells and tastes and feeling of home. The feeling you could describe perfectly, but for the failing of words themselves.